braving the continued snow this evening. It will never end. We have a microphone if you think that we need it. Otherwise, we'll just go like this. Wave your hand. So this whole idea started with the Bridging the Gap exhibit, and that's kind of why we're here tonight. So the idea behind this exhibit is if you read the news cycle, it can feel overwhelming, and it feels like the world is falling apart at times. But I'm here to tell you tonight that it is not falling apart. When you put things in historic context and think about problems that we're having in the present, kind of in this long-range view, things can feel somewhat better, but also somewhat worse. So what we were trying to do with the Gap exhibit is compare 1969 to the present, because in '69 it also felt like the world was falling apart. Some things have gotten better in that time, some things have gotten worse. Now, we don't want to overwhelm you with bad news in this exhibit. What we're trying to do is bring people together. So find ways where people get in a room, talk to one another again. I always use the example that if you're at home over the holidays, you might argue with your family back and forth, but you walk out of the room, hopefully, knowing that they're fundamentally a decent human being and you don't demonize them and hate them. And I'm hoping that this is where we can start to bridge the gap, is by making these connections. And so by being here tonight, I think we're taking a step in that direction. So I want to thank our politicians, Ron and Amanda for being here, the League of Women Voters for participating in this. And I hope that you all enjoy yourselves this evening, and then take a little piece of this and spread it around the world, and let's make a little bit of a better place. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jean with the League of Women Voters.
Welcome, I'm Jean Roberts. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Appleton, and we are thrilled to participate in this event. Our 100-year history of nonpartisan political activity focuses on increasing voter participation and education with our mission to empower voters and defend democracy. We believe that the more people who participate in our democratic process, the stronger our country becomes. We also believe that different people with different viewpoints can talk together and listen together and work together in order to continue the greatness that our country is. We're going to be conducting 2 candidate forums in the next month. One is on March 7th at 7:00 p.m. in the Appleton Public Library. That will be a candidate forum for the Appleton alderperson positions. And those are districts which Jackie?
I want to say 3, 7, 9.
3, 7, 9.
3, 7,
Okay.
9, and 13.
On March 14th, we will be conducting a school board candidate forum at Kaleidoscope, which is the former Roosevelt Middle School, and that'll be in their auditorium at 7 o'clock. The forums are free and open to the public. In addition, we're working hard at entering data into our website, vote411.org, which is a nonpartisan website that we're working to get local candidate information and help people with their local decisions. We're currently in talks with the Performing Arts Center on a reading of 12 Angry Men by 12 local women leaders in the Fox Valley.
That's good.
More information will be available on our website as that becomes more available. Anyone who's interested in finding out more about the League can talk to Jackie or myself. So not just a couple of housekeeping items. This is intended to be a civil conversation between 2 people from different political parties, not talking about politics. How fun is that? In order for a civil conversation to happen, all sides need to be able to talk, but more importantly, able to listen. And just a reminder, you can't talk and listen at the same time. And you also can't listen if you're preparing what you're going to say in response to the person who's talking. If we have time, we'll have questions, and we'll do them in the same way that the League does their forums. We have cards that people can write questions that they have. And if you have a question, Brian, you want to Brian will pick up your card and bring it up to Jackie and, to ask. Please be respectful of everyone in the room, including both the participants and the audience, by not talking during the program. And now, give a warm welcome to our participants, Representative Amanda Stuck. Representative Ron Tussler. And Vice President of Voter Service for the League of Women Voters of Appleton, Jackie Klimaszewski.
Okay, so we're going to get started. This will be a conversation. I don't know if you're familiar with the living room conversation model. So I'm going to talk about what that is so you know what to be expecting.
Sure.
Because it is going to be a conversation. And so my role as moderator is way different than the forums that she talks about that we're going to be having on Thursday and the Thursday after. So part of knowing what our living room conversation is knowing what it is not. It is not the forum format, because these are not candidates at this point in time, okay? Yes, they are from different parties, but that's kind of why we want different perspectives and viewpoints, and to show that, yes, we can have different parties, and we can get along, and we can understand each other. Also, it's not like that traditional forum in that I'm not timing them. There's no timer here. The goal here is that they will have actually conversed with one another rather than being behind that table like those forums, and they only direct the questions to the audience and not to one another. This is a different situation. And my role as moderator is going to be different. Yes, we have questions. It's different in that I share the questions that we're starting with them. When we do our traditional forums, that's not true. They don't know the questions until they get there. They have the questions ahead of time. There's more questions than I can possibly ask. But part of that was so that as the conversation moves, because who knows where it will take us, I need to have the questions that are going to get us back on track or that will extend it depending on what they're saying. So it is like a conversation, and it'll be response questions rather than just a list of questions per se. Okay, so the living room conversation is a model that has been very effective. There's some personal case studies here that of how they're effective. The idea is that you get a small group of people, and this is very small. Usually you're talking 6 or 7, but we're just doing it with the 2 because of time constraints. They get to know one another in a more meaningful way. It's a simple, sociable format. Participants practice being open and curious about all perspectives with a focus on learning from one another, rather than trying to debate a topic at hand. So we're looking for that common ground, okay? So the conversation agreements, I'm going to go over, they've had these, but it's kind of important that you as the audience also understand the agreements that we're working on here for the conversation. Be curious and open to learning. So a conversation, as Jean mentioned, is as much about listening as it is about talking. So enjoy hearing all points of view, maintaining that attitude of exploration. Okay? So it's a different mindset. Show respect and suspend judgment. Boy, humans, that's hard for us, isn't it? We always make judgments about everything. So in this regard, to really hear what they're saying and open your head to it, suspend that judgment. Set it aside so that you can learn from others and make them feel respected and appreciated. As I said, we're looking for that common ground. Yes, we'll note those differences because that's interesting to hear the differing beliefs and points of view. That's how we learn. We expand our head that way. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Own and guide the conversation. So that's kind of where we're at with this model. Now, questions that I've selected from These are all available on the website. The other thing I should mention is that, yes, we are being videotaped. Thank you, Dan. And this will be on YouTube tomorrow sometime, and we'll get a connection to the link, and that'll be on our website, and we'll get it to the museum. So yes, my plan here in looking at these questions now has been pretty much relationships, starting with how do you build relationships and how important relationships are, and then moving into community kinds of questions, and then if we have time, taking it from personal, relationship, community, to the American dream kind of thing, building it that way. So building that groundwork on relationships first. So how we treat each other is the difference between a great place to live and a bad place to live. We shape our world through our relationships. And most people would agree we want communities where all people have dignity and respect. Yet, respectful interactions are often not what we see modeled in the media and in politics. Far too many people feel disrespected in their lives. And so, what's our role in these dynamics? In this conversation, we want to create a space to talk about our experiences and shared aspirations. Remember, our goal here is to listen and to learn. And so now, I'm done. My job is just continue and ask questions here. So of course, the first question has to be, why did you agree to participate, and what do you hope to accomplish? Anyone?
I would say I just think it's a really important topic. I think it is really difficult to talk about this right now. I mean, right now it is really hard to talk to family members who we disagree with. So I think it's really important to figure out how do we have these conversations? How do we talk respectfully with people we might disagree with? And particularly if we can bring the community into that, I think that's a really great thing to make it a larger thing than just our own personal efforts to try and figure that out.
Well, first, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to do this was because I really do greatly believe in bipartisanship. I really think that way too much of the partisan politics that we see, among other things, is just incredibly inefficient. It's just much more efficient for us to try to work together. Another reason is I wanted to do it with Amanda. So I've had an opportunity to build relationships with a lot of Democrats. I'll be the first to tell you that there's some Democrats I probably get along with and enjoy working with better than some of my Republican colleagues. And maybe Amanda feels the same way about some of the folks she works with. But I wanted to do it with Amanda because I don't know that we've built as much of a relationship as I want. You know, you're right next door, and I have a building in your district. So, you know, good relationship with you is important to me. And, for whatever reason, we just haven't seen much of each other in the Capitol, and I saw this as an opportunity to change that. So that was another reason that I certainly wanted to do that. And then just kind of the projects that I worked on. So I come from a family of previous legislators. My great-grandfather was Gordon Buboltz. He was a state senator, helped set aside roughly 22 state parks, including High Cliff. He also built Secure Insurance from a very small company, that's kind of what it is. And, you know, one of the things, I mean, my family is historically Republican, and he was Republican too, but one of the things that I think has always been really important to family members of mine, like Walt Ruglin, who's been very involved in our community here, and my grandpa, and, you know, different relatives of mine that are all over the political spectrum, is trying to get past that and trying to get something done and get accomplishments done inside of the community. So, you know, that's kind of the individuals I grew up with, and those are kind of the values that I have. So when I see conversations that get ugly between maybe our speaker and your speaker in the Capitol, I have very little interest in that because I don't see any accomplishment being made there. It just seems like we're making victims of each other. And I don't want to see that. And I think it's a real disappointment to see as much as we do. And instead of focusing more on trying to accomplish the things that we might be able to both agree on, or at least give a little bit together. So.
It's interesting that, and thank you for sharing how you got into the whole political thing. I mean, how did you get into politics?
Yeah.
You grew up with it.
Yeah, completely opposite for me. So my parents were actually both quite poor and young. They had me, and they were not involved in politics. I mean, they were just focused on trying to live every day. So politics was not something they were interested in. But a family friend took me to see Bill Clinton speak when I was 10. And to this day, I remember standing in this miserable cornfield on a rainy day, with a bunch of people who were willing to stand out there in this miserable cornfield on a rainy day to see Bill Clinton, and it left this impression on me that they must really think he can make a difference in their lives, and that's why they're willing to stand out here. And I was really impressed by that. And after that, every time at school, we have to answer, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd write Bill Clinton. So that was really how I got involved.
So, what sense of purpose, I want to call it mission or duty, guides you in your life? Nice, meaty question.
To me, I would say just service to others. I mean, it really is about other people. At the end of the day, money and power don't matter. It's really about the people in your lives and what have you done to leave things better for them and to help them along. So to me, it's really about helping, whether it's the people I love or my community, but it's all about them at the end of the day.
You know, for me, I think I started out very family focused and, focused on my sister, my mom, and my dad growing up. And then it kind of seemed like my family got to be more of Appleton. And then it got to be UW-Milwaukee, where I went to undergrad. And I kind of feel almost like Wisconsin, just the sheer values that we have in Wisconsin, I don't know if it's our accent or what, but, it's kind of been an expanding sphere of people that, I want to take care of and I just want to do my very best for. So I guess maybe that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, we found some common ground.
Yeah.
You got it.
Already. So, what would your best friend say about who you are?
My best friend's known me since middle school, so I don't probably have a lot to say.
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because when I was younger, I think I probably had a reputation among my friends as being a little bit over-argumentative. And I think that they kind of meant, did say that I'll be a judge someday or something like that. I don't know if I'm too interested in that, but, my best friend growing up was Jim Dieter, and went to Lawrence University, and he's just a really good father, and I think he would probably mention maybe what I said before, and that's, family values are really important to me, and, my Christian faith is as well. So.
I think my friends would say I'm an incredibly hard worker. Obviously anybody who has known me knows my story of being a single mom on welfare and working my way through school and multiple jobs at a time to pay for that and make that happen. So that's something I hear often from my friends. It's just amazed at my work ethic and how hard I work and how yet I still always want to try and find time to help others and be there for other people.
And I would agree with that about Amanda. I mean, my experience is, I watch a lot of other legislators, and I'm curious how they do their job and kind of compare it to how I do my job, and, maybe they do something better. Out of all the legislators, both Republican and Democrat, I've never met anybody like Amanda that attends more events and is more involved in, her local community. And that always impresses me, because she's always there. And that's tough to do. In the real world, when you've got balancing Madison, whatever else is going on in your life, and this, it's a tougher balance than maybe it would seem. And I don't think anybody does better than she does.
So, have you ever seen or maybe been in a conversation when people were not listening to each other? And how did that turn out? Relate some experiences with that.
Every day on the floor.
Yeah, for sure on the floor. I mean, it's an interesting experience, and it was a kind of a shock as a freshman. This is my second session. It's just began, so my first session was before. We do these speeches on the floor, and I just wonder, who are we speaking to? Because the other side has clearly closed their mind. I mean, they're not still reasonably thinking. And so basically, you know, I guess we're speaking to Wisconsin Eye, but people have already made so many decisions prior to coming in that it doesn't seem like there's an open mind left in the room, which I think is wrong. I'd much rather hear from the other side before I vote. But at the same time, you know, I think Penny knows the, you know, the pressures too of, you know, trying to work as a team as well, and that's part of being in, you know, a 99 person group.
I mean, certainly when we're on the floor, minds have already been set, and you're not talking to your colleagues, you're trying to, you know, to change their mind. Minds are already made up, so that's certainly an example. But I also think even just your doors, you knock on doors, and you get somebody who is on the opposite side of you. A lot of the time, they aren't really interested in listening to what you have to say. They just want to tell you, oh, you're a Democrat, so nothing good about you, nothing redeeming about you. I'm not going to waste my time, or, you know, they don't really want to listen. They don't care about learning about what you actually think about issues. They'll just tell you, oh, you're a Democrat, you hate business. And it's like, well, if you listen to me, maybe you hear that I don't hate business and hear my ideas, but, you know, sometimes you get that person who doesn't want to have that conversation. And I do think it's unfortunate sometimes that people just cut it off and don't even want to talk to you because of one label they put on you without taking any time to get to know you or talk to you.
And in this position, I think the vast majority of people, at least in the assembly and in the state government that I know, have really good intentions. And I want to make everybody happy. It's not one group or another group. And the tough part is when you hit those kind of closed minds and you want to try to get them to open their mind a little bit, and it's just not possible. So, yeah, I'd agree that's a little bit frustrating to deal with, you know, when you're doing doors. But, you know, there's also doors on the other end that basically you go up to, and, you know, if you're the right party, it's a done deal before you set to work. So, those are kind of at least friendly doors to do. Goes both ways.
But, you know, when you either have that or somebody that's going to vote for you just because of your party affiliation or not vote for you because of your party affiliation, what gets lost is really good conversations about what does our community need, how can it be better.
And it doesn't feel very rewarding when basically you just show up and whatever, if you're the right color, you know, if you're the right, you know, red or blue color, you know, you either have it or you don't. So I'd much rather have an open conversation with somebody and, you know, find out whether I'm a really good advocate for their needs or not, than really either win or lose based on, you know, before I even touch the doorknob.
Okay, so we're always part of different groups, we want to call them tribes. And we've kind of now talked about your labels, your Republican label, your Democrat label, maybe your politician label even.
Yeah.
But you're both part of lots of other groups, right? You're in other tribes, if you will, and other organizations. Can you talk about some of your other circles?
Yeah, you bet. I'm a former teacher. I taught in the inner city in Milwaukee. I went to UW Milwaukee and then taught U.S. history, Civil War to present. So that's certainly, you know, a group. I'm also a lawyer, and I represent accident victims here in Appleton, and protect people from insurance companies, even though my family started one. Whatever, I'm getting there, but I've actually had cases with them too, and we've gone all the way to trial sometimes. But you know, I would certainly say that is a couple of groups. I'm also, you know, a new father. I just had a daughter 9 months ago for the first time, and that's been fun to kind of hang out with some other folks. Thank you. Because you just get so excited about, you know, hopefully everyone, but you know, as a new father, that's kind of my center of attention. So I'd say definitely kind of those three groups. And then, you know, I was chairman of the Allegheny County Republican Party, and that's certainly a group that, you know, I really enjoyed spending time with and getting other people involved in that. So, you know, I really do think that just the type of person that gives their time to any cause, whether it's political or non-political, is generally somebody that's really caring to other people, that really wants to see a better world, that really has good intentions, whether it's, you know, pulling one direction or not.
Circles?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So I would say probably one of my biggest tribes outside of politics would be the UU Fellowship that I'm a member of. What else? I mean, I certainly, mom group, I do PTO in my kids' schools, and I'm involved with that, so certainly I think of that sort of as my tribe, my other PTO moms, and the parents that are deeply involved in schools. The dog park is my tribe. I spend quite a bit of time there.
Culture too.
It does have its own culture. I spend quite a bit of time there.
So in these different groups, have you ever taken a position or voiced an idea that was different from a group that you are a part of? You're a part of that group, but now you're have a different position. And how did that feel? And have you ever decided against speaking out because it just wasn't worth the repercussions?
Yes, for me, and I bet a lot of folks have guessed where that might be. So I was a teacher in the inner city in Milwaukee, and a student teacher, and I had pretty much, I'm not sure that I would have considered myself as a Republican, but at that time, but I certainly would have considered myself, more conservative leaning maybe at that point than left leaning. And I was in a situation, basically where that wasn't a way to gain very much popularity. And there were certain kind of unwritten rules on what you could say and what you couldn't say, and how to promote something or not to promote something. And that definitely led to some awkwardness. I had some really good mentors there, and I think that really helped. But I would say it was a little bit difficult in that, especially as a 21-year-old, a 22-year-old. I think I was 22 at that time. I'm not sure I had the confidence to really stand out in a way that could cost me a job or could cost me a future in that profession if, when I go to law school, it didn't work out for me.
Yeah, so I actually just recently had experience about a bill that came to the Assembly, where I was the only Democrat who wanted to vote differently than the rest of the Democrats, and the governor wanted us to. And it was one of the most stressful experiences I've ever experienced. To be the only one on the outside, to feel like you're making your case and nobody's listening to you about why you feel the way you do about the bill and how we should vote on it. It's terrible. It's a terrible feeling to be on the outside of your tribe or your group. To feel like they are mad at you for not supporting them or going along with what they want. It's really a terrible feeling. But it's one of those things where sometimes you feel so strongly about something that you have to stand up because going along with something you don't agree with feels just as bad.
Yeah, no, I had experience last year too regarding the bill, the Civil Tort Reform Bill. It's pretty painful to create relationships with people, have successful bills, feel like you've got some sense of whether that person's going to help you or not help you in the future, and whatever random, thing you decide to advocate for, and then destroy those reputations. You have those same folks advocating against you and talking a little smack, because they're just not happy with the fact that you're not supporting something that you know is a bad idea. And there's no doubt in my mind it was a bad idea. I did everything I could to stop it. Obviously, a portion of it was stopped. I thought the most important portion was stopped, thankfully. But some important portions did survive. It was, disappointing for me. I would have rather not seen it happen. So it wasn't much fun to have your group attack you. It's a little bit more part of the game for the other side to attack you. I don't know that it really feels the same sort of feeling as I think Amanda was describing when it's that kind of fight.
Okay, what you're saying is very disconcerting. I'm finding that I want to interject around how this kind of civility and this kind of being able to you used the word confidence when you needed the confidence to stay the course when you were in student teaching.
Mm-hmm.
How does that confidence then roll out when you have viewpoints that you feel it's important for you to express? express that may be different in whatever support.
Well, for me, it comes from the support system. I mean, certainly when there are things you feel strongly about that maybe aren't popular with your group or your tribe, or that are harder to speak out about or stand behind, it really comes down to having support. I know I called Penny when I needed support, and during this last bill I just talked about, that was pretty stressful. I think I called my mom every day. I mean, honestly, you need a support network sometimes when it's difficult, when you have to stand out there and put yourself out there on the line. You need good people to support you and remind you who you are and why you should stand up for the things you believe in.
Regarding something like, that tort reform bill I mentioned, sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt like this on a particular issue, but if you feel strongly enough, you kind of have to give it a, screw it, this is what I believe kind of mentality. In that particular issue, I believed I was right. No one ever knows they're right, but I believed I was right, and I believed they were wrong. And to me, I felt strongly enough that, if it cost me this job, then it cost me this job. And thankfully it didn't, but I think at some point, this is a finite job, for most people. They're not going to do it their entire career. And I think you have to have certain standards, certain, lines that you just won't cross. And for me, that was a particular line that I just didn't feel right crossing.
I would also say, for me, my kids are a big motivator for me, so I often think, what do I want to teach them? What's the example I want to set? So is it that you give in when it gets hard, or that you stand up for what you believe in and do what's right, even if it's difficult sometimes?
So, let's get back to like friends and relatives with whom you were able to talk about hard things in a respectful way. Those hard conversations, but in a respectful way where you, I guess the phrase is, hold the tension of your differences. What's the difference you have with this person, and why do you find it worthwhile to talk in this respectful way together? And I'm feeling that the difference in this question was the trust, the importance of that relationship as opposed to some of the other situations that you're describing.
I think, at least for me, the vast majority of people that, I know I have a great relationship with, but they'll call me out if I'm wrong. But for me, my mother was somebody who kind of unconditionally loved me. She was going to agree with any issue I agreed on, and sometimes I would not be sure if she really would agree with that if it wasn't for what her just trying to be supportive. But it was really great to have her support as long as I did. She died last September. She had fought cancer for 22 years, had really a tough life, At 58 she died, and she'd had cancer since, her mid-30s. So that was not fair to her. But I really miss that now. Just kind of, that was who I called on my drive in, was to just talk to her, and that was a nice way to spend that drive and kind of, remind myself of why I'm doing what I'm doing and why it's important. So, losing that kind of unconditional love that I had from her was a real loss. But, it's made me stronger, and it's made relationships with my dad, and, who's now lost his wife, and my wife, even more stronger. So, I think that you need somebody that's just on your side, through thick and thin, whether you're right or wrong.
Well, I'm trying to think of, I guess to be honest, I don't know that I have a lot of strong relationships with people who have different viewpoints. But of those I do, sort of amongst friends, I think what it comes down to is the conversation's never about proving you're better or smarter or right. It's really about understanding. I think even to my personal trainer as a strong Republican, she always tells me how she's a Republican, but never like in a patronizing way or mean way. It's more about, talks about how she grew up and how that led her to think the way she does and believe the things she believes. So it's often more just about understanding more than it is about somebody trying to win or be right in that conversation.
And I think that's a good point. There's way too much of politics that's about winning. And an issue should theoretically be winnable. I mean, an issue should be an issue, and we should try to be as rational as possible. And I think one of the problems that we often, I think, are doing in our society is we're looking at a problem and saying, well, that's a win for Democrats and a loss for Republicans, or a win for Republicans, a loss for Democrats. And I think that's a real inefficient way to think. I think we'd be much better off looking at an issue and, trying to have a conversation with it. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it isn't a win for anybody or a loss for anybody.
So let's see if we can find a good example here of when you used respect and listening to resolve a problem in some place where it worked.
I'm trying to think of anything across the aisle. I mean, certainly I think this happens within a caucus a lot, where you have disagreements within your caucus quite frequently, and you just try and sit down with that person and talk about, okay, what can we agree on, what can't we agree on, let's focus on where we can agree, try and move something forward, or understand how we can make both of us happy and move something forward in terms of legislation. So a lot of it's just kind of talking it through, kind of the listening, give and take to make something happen. I think of an example across the bill. Well, I think across the aisle. I mean, I guess one example, not necessarily legislative-wise, but Adam Nealon and I did start the Future Caucus. He's a Republican from Milwaukee. So we did start the Future Caucus to really work on this issue more and talk about how do we create trust and better relationships across the aisle in order to work better and function better down in Madison. Because part of it is just we really don't get a chance to talk or get to know somebody on the other side unless you're really intentional about it and make it happen. Because everything is so separate. Caucus is separate. Receptions in Madison are separate. Everything is separate. So to really get those chances to come together, this is something we thought was really important. So we did start this Future Caucus to bring people together. It is focused on millennials, but it's really just across the aisle. I always say we don't check IDs at the door, so everybody's welcome who wants to come and talk about how do we work better together, how do we change the tone and find things we can agree on to move forward with.
And I think that, this year, especially this period, but last year as well, there is a certain momentum that a bill has to have to continue moving forward. And one of the best ways to increase that momentum is bipartisanship. It is calling somebody, finding somebody else that feels the same, and trying to do that. So I think another way that we, get to know each other better and get to know kind of what's important to certain people is actually advocating for our own bills, believe it or not, because that is one of the motivators that gets us to find somebody and say, hey, this seems like something you would like. Would you consider it? Or, what changes would have to be made for you to be involved in? And, I think that's an advantage too.
So what are the key characteristics, would you say, of healthy relationships in your life? Personal, social, workplace, political interactions. The key characteristics of a healthy relationship. What are the threads that you would see running through that?
I think communication is really important. Being able to say, things that you're happy about, things that you're sad about, to really be able to talk about whatever is going on openly, not be afraid to bring up hard things or share happy things, that it really is a safe environment to bring whatever it is to the table and be able to have a good discussion and really communicate, I think, is the biggest key.
I find one of the most effective things, at least in the Capitol, is just trying to have a sense of humor. If I could just find something to giggle about with another person, as random as it is, you can really go a long way toward, showing that you respect that person, you care about that person, and that that's somebody, or that you're somebody that is worthy of their trust. So, I think that you have to consider relationships a little bit differently in the Capitol in that, if you want to be a successful legislator, you have to build those connections. And I think almost everybody, if not everybody, identifies that and wants to be more friendly to other folks, especially across the aisle. Like I said, some of my favorite people to work with. I love working with David Crowley. Evan Goyke and I, we went to law school together, so we know a lot of the same professors and stuff. And he's a very intelligent person, so he's fun to work with on stuff too. But it's just the Capitol is a business too. I mean, it's a business in that it's like everybody works there. And while some people are on kind of one team and some people are on the other team, we all have so many connections and so many kind of, entanglements with each other that it's easy to forget who's on which side. I mean, when I'm joking around with David Crowley, for example, who's just got a really good sense of humor, and he went to the same school that I taught. We can usually, a couple minutes into it, we're just as comfortable with each other as we would be, somebody that, maybe doesn't have the personality like, some Republicans, that just aren't that, maybe, for lack of a better term.
Well, I think trust is so important. It just is so lacking, especially between political parties right now, people of different political affiliations. I know that you brought up the dance that I asked my Republican counterparts to be part of, which was a fundraiser for babes, where you do like a singing, dancing kind of thing as a group to raise money for them. And I had reached out to some of my Republican colleagues saying maybe as a Fox Valley group we could be part of this to help support this nonprofit. I know at first I think some of my Republican colleagues thought, what is she trying to get us to do? Like, what is she setting us up for? And we're a little leery about it because that's how, people, that's how bad it can be. You just always are thinking, what is somebody cross out? What are they trying to do? How are they trying to get me? There's no assumption of trust. There's always this assumption of something bad, something nefarious that they're trying to do.
Well, that's a great segue into the next question. What factors into your decision to trust or not trust? How do you get that personal and working relationship without trust? And so how do you do that?
I think rapport and experience are two kind of important things. When you can tell when you have rapport with someone, and you can tell when you don't have rapport with someone, and if you're kind of in a good communication cycle with them, and you feel like you can show your cards, and if you do, sometimes you have to be the first to kind of step out there and say, I don't, I know a lot of my colleagues think this, but I'm not one of them. So I think kind of that rapport, and then just experience. The more you work with somebody, the more good experiences you have. Where, for example, there's a couple legislators that were on the wrong side of that bill I talked about before, and our experience isn't that great, so it's more difficult for us to work together. So, it kind of cuts both ways. If you burn a bridge, it's a lot harder to fix it than, especially as a freshman, where everybody kind of wants to like you for the most part, and you're not probably as dangerous feeling, maybe, for lack of a better way to put it, than, somebody that's got 20 years of experience, pulling shenanigans.
Yeah, I think it's really just about time and effort. You really have to work, I think, to build that trust. I think of the Future Caucus and how we're a year in, a little over a year in now. And truly, we've spent all this that you're just trying to build trust with members and getting them to buy in that this is a safe thing, like nobody's being set up, like nobody's going to be hurt by participating in this. And really just building that trust in there. But it takes a long time. I mean, I think of, just my colleagues in the area, how there's another fundraiser thing I'm trying to get Republicans to be involved in with me, but hopefully because they know, like last time I did set them up, it was good for everybody, that now when I approach them things, it'll be more open that, let's work together on stuff like this in the community versus the first time, and, they didn't know me as well, they didn't know what it was going to be like to work with me on this, that now we've had some time and experience that hopefully we'll be able to work together and build more of a relationship to do those things together.
So let's segue a little bit into the American dream. Since early in America's history, the American dream was the belief that anyone in this country could make it if they worked hard enough. Some people believe this has always been an illusion, while others say it's a legitimate heritage of our country. So what are your hopes and concerns for your community and our country? One is part of the other. Hopes and concerns.
Well, one of the things that there's lots of hopes and lots of concerns I think probably both Amanda and I have. One of the things that, I'm very excited about, and something that I think that especially my colleagues are really excited about, is the solution that such a low unemployment rate has on our society. I was an inner city school teacher. I spent a lot of time on the south side of Milwaukee when I was teaching. And I really care about those kids. I mean, one of the coolest things that ever happened to me was I was out, playing volleyball at Bradford Beach in Milwaukee, and a bunch of classmates came up and, wanted to play with me and remembered, how hard I worked for them and all that kind of stuff. But, with our unemployment rate in Wisconsin, it's a real opportunity for individuals that are difficult to employ to get involved with a job and better themselves and kind of reach that American dream. And that's so important to me because I recognize that if you're born at a certain class of America with a certain amount of intelligence, you have the opportunity, but obviously not everybody does. And there's a lot of folks that, had very difficult upbringings. When I taught in the inner city, for example, I had 125 students and 3 parents showed up for parent-teacher conferences. I had one gal that was in one of my classes who was pregnant with her 3rd child at 17. There were some real difficult situations, these things happen in the Fox Valley too, but not as often as I think I saw in the inner city. And to have the opportunity to give some of those folks, an ability to get out of the cycles that I think, with teen pregnancy we see in the inner city and some of the other things that I saw, there's just such opportunity there. And so to me, low unemployment like we've got in Wisconsin right now is just one opportunity for the American dream to be truly realized. And I believe that almost everybody can make it in this country, but I also agree that some people don't have a chance. And I feel really bad for those folks. And, if there's anything I can do to help them, I'm always ready to go to bat for them.
American dream.
I would say, I think, listening to you, it's quite similar. And my hope and my concern basically are just 2 sides of one coin. That my hope would be that every single person in the community feels supported and welcomed and respected, and that they feel they're able to pursue whatever their dream is and to live their best life. And my concern is that doesn't happen for people, that we don't have a community where people feel that. And, I think the concern is about getting to a point where do we get too far gone, whatever the problem is, whether it's climate change or education, whatever the issue is, do we get too far gone that we can't address it? But I do have hope that we can work together and put our minds together as people and address the big issues that are scary and seem overwhelming and really create that community and that world where, again, everybody is welcome and respected and can reach their full potential.
You want to add?
No, I don't think so.
So this is the point in our agenda where questions. So there are cards and pens, and Brian is there, and so is Jean. So if you have any questions that you would like to, they will collect them and bring them up, and I will ask them. They will be screened.
Can I ask a question before this gets started?
Sure.
Thank you. So last night, I didn't watch it, I was working. Governor Evers gave his budget out. And the immediate thing I saw from Senator Roth was, and other Republicans, and I think there's good Republicans, don't get me wrong. It's like bashing, unwillingness to work with any of the ideas that the governor floated. I'll just give one example.
Well, okay, so we want to focus this on how we can build the trust, and I think that both of these folks did a great job of giving us insights in some of the dysfunction, and that a lot of it revolves around not having trust, having your talking points all set before you ever gave a speech, or before, as you say, you're talking and everybody's mind's made up. So that is a concern. The caucus is one way I heard that you're trying to address that. Are there other concrete kinds of things that you...
Well, and to talk to, kind of toward bipartisanship, one of the things that I think we're in a habit of doing, just kind of in general when it comes to politics, is taking the actions of one person and then kind of throwing them onto everybody that fits within that group.
Overgeneralizing.
Yeah, and, you know, for example, well, I don't know, it's just, to me, I think it's difficult, because I think that when we stereotype and we kind of overgeneralize, what we're doing is we're kind of feeding the fire of, you know, the lack of bipartisanship, because it doesn't give me a voice, you know, it makes me, you know, adopt something that I might not necessarily agree with. But then, it's kind of, when everybody's kind of assumed that you have that position, sometimes it's a natural inclination to take that position, because it's kind of already been assumed that you have that position. So, you know, I think that's one way we can kind of avoid it, is to try not to give so much attention. I mean, and obviously the political parties are going to have a lot of attention, but, you know, I think focusing on the bipartisanship, the things that we do outside. So I had 10 bills that were signed by Governor Walker last year. 9 of them had Democrat votes, were bipartisan bills. You know, if I gave you the list of bills that I did last year, I think you would probably look at most of them and say that'd been a pretty good year for a Democrat. So I had $4.5 million for our state parks. I had 2 bills on domestic violence. I had 1 bill on wetland mitigation.
And so, Ron, you got those passed because of the relationships you built across the aisle, is that what I heard you saying?
And they were good ideas. You know, that really helps too. And most of the ideas don't really come from my brain, or probably Amanda's, but somebody brought them to me and said, hey, you know, your grandpa set aside this park, don't you want it to get some funding so they can have a better bubbler system? And I said, of course I do. You know, I mean, what better way to, you know, make my great grandpa, who was deceased a long time ago, proud than, you know, to support the park that he, you know, obviously, you know, focused so much on. So, you know, I think that the good ideas certainly help, but, you know, just kind of, you know, looking for that stuff that you can do together, I think is really important. I think the focus on party is too much. And the more we talk about I think the individual legislator and what the individual legislator has worked on and focused on and cares about, I think the more we can kind of get away from the assumptions that we're making with, you know, all Republicans think this and all Democrats think that.
Do you have some cards?
I'm working on it.
I'll just add something to that quickly. So I think the unfortunate thing though is that works, right? The whole bashing the other side, that's what gets the media attention, right? When the media comes up to you after an event like that speech, they don't ask you, please give me your nuanced analysis of the budget, right? I mean, literally they'll ask, what don't you like about Walker's budget? I mean, that's what they would ask when Walker was the governor, right? I mean, they go to the question that's divisive because that's what will get attention on the news, unfortunately. And not just to blame the media, but because it works in politics. I mean, quite frankly, you see this division in politics because it works. Because that's how people win elections. If I bash the other guy and say whether it's bad, I win. And unfortunately, it works. So some of it is holding ourselves, I think, to a higher standard, quite frankly, holding our elected officials to a higher standard by voting and participating and showing up at things like this. Because as long as we're sort of empathetic and just kind of go off the sound bites, it works, and that's why you see it, and that's why it happens.
I mean, one thing when I started my first campaign, I decided is that I would never say a negative thing about any of my competition. And I haven't yet, and that's, you know, every election's different, so hopefully I'll be able to keep that promise to myself. But I never have. I've never had to do a personal attack on everybody, and at the Capitol, it's always been the same way. You know, there's issues I don't agree with. I mean, that's my job. But, you know, attacking an individual, to me, I think, is adding to the problem instead of adding to the solution. So.
Okay, I have some that kind of fit the theme
Okay.
of the evening, and I have some that are fairly issue specific.
We'll start here.
Sure.
This looks like plenty. Okay, I haven't read these yet, so. But I trust. Okay. Are there things to be done or steps to be taken internally in the legislative system that can make trusting your colleagues easier? Does the internal power structure impede or hinder bipartisanship? Sounds like a good study for a dissertation.
So I personally would say the internal structure really impedes it because your leadership has a lot of power. They control a lot of the resources in terms of funding for campaigns, and so they will basically tell you what to do, and if you stray from that, they can tell you, oh, well, good luck running your next campaign, leadership really does have a lot of power, so I think that really is a barrier if you don't have leadership that is supportive of a bipartisan approach. So I think there's steps there just in terms of, as caucus members, holding our leadership accountable to what they do and, setting the standard that we want something better, we want more bipartisan work. I also do think the future caucus are an answer to try and build those relationships and make opportunity to work together and make time to focus on finding bridges there across the aisle. I also think even just fun things like, back to the silly dance thing or things I might invite my colleagues to do here, those are relationship builder things that we can do together and it gives us an opportunity to find things to support and work on together.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, that's one of the difficult things as a legislator is you can get stonewalled. I mean, you can get to a point where a speaker just decides he's never going to move forward with your bill. And, not because your bill's a problem, but because something else that's unrelated that has your support or doesn't have your support. So the structure is difficult. It's difficult to handle. But adjusting the structure would take some creativity, and I'm not sure that I've developed yet. So I'm not sure what you do exactly to change it at this point. And there is probably some things, but we have a body that's one person and the governor, and we have a body that's 33 senators. So, kind of the diversity of our group, I think in the assembly we have certain struggles with leadership that I know we don't have in the Senate. And, Governor Evers is just accountable for himself, as governor. So basically with the difference in structures, I think that diversity is good. So I'm not sure what I would do to change the assembly, but at the same time, the herd mentality that's the assembly is different from those other bodies, and it requires, more of a herd approach than, everybody going their own direction. It doesn't work, so.
I have to say that was my question as an insider. And one of the things that I would encourage people in the legislature to do is to follow up on some work that Representative Fred Hart started.
Okay.
He started working very hard on what other states do and how they do their committee structure and their committee assignments and how they make sure that every representative, every person in the legislature can have an opportunity to introduce a bill in each session.
Yeah.
Whereas our legislature is really very, very top heavy, and the power structure is from the top down, rather than shared by everybody equally. So I encourage you to look at that stuff. Fred Hart's old office. Right.
How can we citizens encourage bipartisanship at government level? What changes, what channels can we
Do you hear?
What
What channels do you hear? How can we
Hear.
influence you? What can you hear to help increase bipartisanship? Obviously, that's what the populace would like to see. How can we influence that? How can we influence you to hear that?
I think voting is the number one thing. Vote for the candidates that prove that they'll work together, that say they'll work together. Voting, I think, is your number one thing to influence politics, no matter what you're trying to influence in the political world. I do think, again, showing up to things like this, when we have things like this, show support for that. So when we started the Future Caucus, I was talking with Stephen O'Hara, who runs MAP, which is the Millennial Action Project, which is the group that started these future caucuses in each state. And I said, it'd be almost great if we had a pact for bipartisanship, make it pay. Money influences elections, I hate to say it, but, if there was a way to really, so again, to support candidates that do work together, and whether it's financially or just with support from volunteers, whatever it may be, but really to help support candidates that do show up, they do want to work across the aisle and work together.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. money does talk, and, either in DC or in Madison. And the problem is that the top fundraisers are usually the biggest ideologues that play to their base best. And, us poor bipartisan folks have a hard time raising much money because the stuff that we're doing for the most part is less controversial and less likely to be on the news and less likely to gain, my constituents, notice. So, to me, I think it's easy for the public to say they want bipartisanship, but it's going to be difficult, and they've got to find a way to be informed enough of when it happens and reward it when it happens, and then really look at the folks that aren't real good at it and see that as a negative. And that's tricky. So, it is. I think if there's some way, someone that was willing to fund that. But if you look at how funding structures work, usually those funding structures are the ones that want the more extreme stuff. The stuff that they can go back and, see how it affected their particular business or industry or that type of thing. It isn't so much, the folks that want, to increase the amount of, bubblers in, Idaho State Park or, some of the other stuff that I've advocated for that felt a little bit lonely while I was doing it, and a little bit felt a little bit lonely afterward. So.
Well, I have to laugh because Stephen's response was kind of, well, we tried to look into that, but donors kind of said, yeah, but I just want my money to go to the Democrat that's working together or the Republican that's working together. I don't want it to go to the person across the aisle. So even within funders that are funding a bipartisan effort, there's still sort of this tribal mentality of, yeah, but I want money to go to this party or that party.
Yeah, it gets to be predictability, they can predict what one party's going to do, but when it comes to bipartisanship, that's less predictable because, the issue could go in one way or the other. So I don't think they're quite as motivated because they don't really know what they're paying for.
We get back to that political party thing, but someone who, kudos to the future caucus, how have your age and number of years in the assembly affected your ability to work with your party and across the aisle?
Do you remember the future caucus? Sure.
I think I remember this never show. So.
I think so. Part of the whole idea behind Millennial Caucus is that millennials sort of have a different worldview, right? Than some of the people who've been down there for a while. We grew up with technology and with a little bit more broad worldview because of travel, because of social media, being able to be connected to people farther away. That was sort of the idea is that maybe there's some connection there, whether you're Republican or Democrat, with that worldview, that maybe we can find more ways to work together, that we have a different outlook on wanting to work together, not necessarily being so divided and so partisan. So I think that's part of age and just the era that we grew up in, that maybe there is hope that there's more focus there, that some of the social issues that divided politicians in the past aren't such a divide now. While we certainly still have issues we don't agree on, that maybe they're not the same entrenched battles that other people have been having forever, so that there's ways to work together and bridge that there. I would say certainly the number of years you get there, I do think it does make it worse. I hate to say it, but really some of the worst people have been down there forever, and everything's very personal. When it comes to issues, it's not really about the issue, it's about, yeah, but the person introducing it did something mean to me a long time ago, and so I don't support them. So I'm not even going to look at the issue, it's just about this personal battle I have with them. So I do think sometimes when you're there for a long time, you get entrenched in that mindset versus when you're newer, you are a little bit more willing to work across the aisle. You haven't had those experiences. You don't have that mindset. So I do think, unfortunately, that can happen when you've been there. And I do see it. And it's a tough world down there. When you really work hard on something and you get burned. I've had experiences people taking your bills or taking ideas so you don't get credit. So when you're there for a long time, I think that stuff builds up and really makes you less willing to listen or work across the aisle.
Yeah. Well, that's really well put. Those are probably the two biggest points I would add. Being a younger guy, I'm 34. I think the optimism of the younger generation is just higher than kind of the pessimism of the folks that they have their ways and they just don't want to change their ways, and so I think it helps to be younger in that way. I think it doesn't help when it comes to, taking larger leadership roles and, running for like a leadership position and that type of thing. I think that's more difficult as a young person because, there's just some respect that you get with gray hair, and I'm losing it as fast as I can, but, it is a little bit different, and people aren't quite as certain, that you're ready for something that, maybe somebody that is older and, perhaps wiser, might be able to get. So I think being younger is more difficult for advancement, but I think people might be more willing to work with you and be, just because of the energy and optimism that you bring to a bill than some of the folks that are a little bit more retired just don't seem to have.
Do you see any way forward in changing that culture in Madison?
The culture of younger people should be in.
No, the culture of, I guess I would call it third graders on the playground. Kind of, the kind of what behaviors you were describing, that kind of not willing to work with someone, and relationships, you always have to build the trust, but then carrying a grudge. And having, I'm kind of hearing you talk about the power, that the power is kind of seductive, and then when you are there long enough and you've got it, you're not gonna let it go. And you kind of lost your purpose,
I think it'll always be an issue for humans in general, right? Power is a problem. But I think it's really about how you put a check on that power, whether it's looking, as Penny suggested, at different structures to spread power out or to make it easier for anybody to take some action rather than just leaving it all on one person. I think there are reasons to be optimistic about that. There are models, there are things we can do, steps we can take. I will tell you, when we first got asked to do the Future Caucus, my initial response was, well, I'll try, but I've tried to do bipartisan stuff already and got burned. So I'll try, but I don't have a lot of hope for how this is going to work. And then I flew out to the MAP Summit to meet with other legislators who had already started Future Caucuses in their state. And I was really amazed with the conversations I was having with somebody across the aisle. And it's almost like, you're Republican? I can't believe we're having such a good conversation and agreeing on so much. And that really, I left that feeling so inspired and hopeful that there really can be a different way to do politics, that we really can agree on things. For instance, I was talking to this Republican about energy policy, and we were agreeing 100%. Now, he was coming in from a purely economical money standpoint. I was coming from a very moral and realistic standpoint on energy, but we were agreeing at the end of the day. So maybe we had different reasons for coming to that understanding or believing that, but we could agree. And so that's all that mattered. We didn't necessarily have to agree on why, we could just agree on what was happening in terms of energy policy. So it just left me feeling really excited that there is hope, there is reasons to be optimistic about how things can be in the future.
Yeah, I think you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. I can't force some of the grumpier folks on either side to be less grumpy. But I can be a good time and maybe cheer them up a little bit, or, I can just make sure I'm not adding to the problem. But it's human nature, and people all have a little bit of fear, that they're going to make a mistake that's going to cost them their job. People go in and out of these professions a lot faster than, any other type of profession in the area. And I think we all have a little bit of that fear. But I think we're best off being optimistic and friendly and trying to work well with each other. And, I certainly agree with some of the comments Amanda said too. But, I think keeping an optimistic, cheery, friendly, humorous perspective can really go a long way to get folks, open up and really kind of talk about their positions instead of just their interests.
So here's kind of, I don't know how many times listening to you talk, this has occurred to me and someone wrote it out on a question, so now I'm legitimately asking. So is it time to abolish political parties? In other words, can we just elect people who want to help make people's lives better and who can decide together ways to accomplish that? And why does there need to be a tribe before one even gets there?
Well, you know, I don't know that you can abolish political parties, not that I am not frustrated enough with the system to want some change and want to see, you know, people work together, but the political parties, I think, and this has, you know, some psychological backing. So there was the Big Five personality test. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but it basically had 5 different personality types. And the folks that are more likely to be Democrat or liberal score very high on empathy. And the folks that score very high on consideration are the Republican conservative types. So the theory is that being considerate toward others is more of a Republican conservative type of a point of view, and having empathy or trying to change the world and make the world a better place is just a more liberal Democrat view. I think because, scientifically we can see that different groups have different personalities, that I think that some sort of political party will develop. And if you look at different countries, there isn't really a country out there that has a hodgepodge of legislators that have no connections or groups or inner workings together. There's always some sort of, sometimes there's multiple parties that will kind of join together into kind of 2 factions, or there'll be multiple parties that sometimes join with one group and sometimes join with another group, so the negotiation can change. But I think just because personality types differ, I think some sort of conservative personality will always develop. And I think some sort of more, empathy, more liberal personality will also develop too. So the idea of completely obliterating the party system, I don't think we'll do that. I think if we did something like that, something else similar or almost identical would probably just redevelop, based on the science there. But at the same time, I think that we can change your mentality. We can change kind of that, I'm a Packer fan and they can pretty much do anything there's hardly anything they could ever do other than maybe trading Brett Favre that would ever make me think of, being frustrated with the team. I'm just always going to be a Packer fan. And, when we do that with political parties, it puts us in a lot of positions that we may or may not adopt. And I think we're better off being independent and being more open-minded to different, ideals, and letting the ideas kind of dictate who we are instead of the parties dictating who we are.
I think in a perfect world, that would be the ideal, right? That it's just about people's care, not about party affiliation. But I think it's not realistic, to be honest, because I just think about a city council race and helping with right now a friend who's running for city council. It's a nonpartisan race. But yet, what's the number one thing everybody pushes? What party are you in? And when you say it's a nonpartisan race, you don't run under a party, but still, but what party are you? Yeah, one time somebody was really pushing her at the door, but she just kept saying it's a nonpartisan race. And finally they said, well, who'd you vote for president? Like, they just would not let it go. They had to know who she voted for and what party she was. So I think, I don't know, it's hard just being humans, and we just need to categorize things all the time, and that's how our brain works. But, I think kind of to Ron's point about, in some way you're still going to identify people in categories or groups, even if there's not a Democrat or Republican label. So I think it would still happen, because again, you just see it even in nonpartisan races. And also I think running a campaign is so incredibly hard out of party structure. It would be so incredibly difficult. But there would end up being some sort of de facto party structure, I'm sure, because it just is so hard to run without a party. That is the role of parties, is to get people elected.
There would be a void that would be created, and something would fill that void, and, we may not ever fill it.
So, we have to live with political parties. How can we balance the power that they have, particularly the peer pressure is what it sounds like, that it almost sounds as if you're the head of the party, you're deciding. That means you're not deciding. That means the people who voted for you aren't deciding. And that's not how it was intended. Yes?
Yeah, again, I would say it always comes back to voting for me. We have such a low voter turnout, and who's really deciding who is in office? It's really generally the extremes of either party, because they're the ones that get out and vote and are paying the most attention. So I think opportunity to say, well, if you haven't been working together, if you haven't been working across the aisle, then maybe you should be there, really hold officials accountable by voting.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that.
So there was somebody who just suggested having a either state or national holiday for elections. Who was that? Who suggested that? Do we know? And could you guys both agree on that?
I think I know who it was, but what they were suggesting, that rather than Columbus Day, which has its own issues around it, why not make Election Day the holiday? And then people could vote. But as we all know, somebody's working every holiday. Anyway, but thoughts about that and all that, how that would improve
I mean, personally, I
to
think
get them to vote.
I would support that. I think it's a good thing to try and make voting as accessible and easy as possible. I mean, certainly, there is a law saying your employer has to let you off to go vote now. Certainly, if you're a low-wage service employee, it's a lot harder for you to stand up and exercise that right than other people, perhaps. So, I mean, I think I certainly support that, but certainly to get people to vote and be engaged would take probably more than just that holiday. There are a lot of issues around voting, like registration,
Sure.
a lot of things that we could do to improve our system to get people registered and make it easier to vote.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we should always do what we can to increase voter turnout. I think that's important. Regarding that particular idea, I think I'm going to decline to comment. I'm the chairman of the campaigns and elections in the assembly, and that issue might be coming through my committee, and I wouldn't. I want to remain unbiased and objective as long as I can on an issue like that. So I don't know if I want to comment specifically on that, but in general, I mean, I think everybody agrees that we really need to have as high a voter turnout as possible and do what we can to get as many people to vote so that we have an idea what they want.
And that goes back to trust. A lot of people don't vote because they don't trust.
I just wondered, you mentioned that whenever there's a reception or something, one party has theirs, do you ever have receptions where it's both parties that get together and meet socially and have the table set up, so if it's a table of 10, there's 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats at those tables, so they can socially get to know each other? And then during those events, maybe have them several times a year, keep switching those people around, so they end
A
up
living
meeting
room
all.
conversation, perhaps.
Pardon?
A living room conversation, perhaps.
That's what it would end up being, of course, but it would be a reception where, get together and have food and drink and socialize. Do you ever do that?
I think that's kind of what Ann's trying to do with her future
Yeah,
caucus.
that's what we've done with the Future Caucus. That's quite a bit of what we've done, just because we've had to take the time to build a relationship in order to even get to a point to talk about legislation. So we've done a lot of social events like that so far this past year. Truly, I've heard it used to not be that way. I heard that it used to be that a lot of the receptions were both parties, that people would go get drinks together outside after the Capitol Day was done on both sides of the aisle. And that really has changed. I mean, certainly there are individuals who are friends and go out and get a drink with somebody across the aisle that they're friends with or do things like that. But I would say as a group, it just doesn't happen a lot. And the receptions tend to be, you identify with the groups that are your friends and go there. Sometimes I think, there's some bipartisan participation, but for the most part, it's sort of the Democrats are with these Democratic groups and the Republicans are over here with the Republican groups at their receptions, so you just don't get that a lot.
Well, I hope you're successful in getting those caucuses together and turning them into some nice parties so people can socialize and maybe have a rule when you come in the door. We're not going to talk politics, we're going to talk about becoming neighbors and friends.
Mm-hmm.
So the bipartisan solution is more parties.
Well, I'll never forget, you started when I did, right? We came in the same,
No,
you
I was
came after me.
one after.
Were you there when we had like the bomb scare that one time, or you went to drink? Was that the session you were there? Oh, it was before you. So I remember we had one session where there was a bomb scare, so we had to evacuate the Capitol. And so you had legislators at all the bars on the square there having drinks together because they were kind of stuck. They couldn't go back into the Capitol. They were stuck to sit outside. And while it sounds kind of silly, I mean, honestly, there was probably more bipartisan, conversation and camaraderie during that time than there was any other time outside the
takes bomb scares.
But just honestly,
I'm scared of parties.
Did you want to ask the question?
Yeah, I had one of the questions that I'm not going to ask because it was more issue specific, but this is a question of, I'm running for District 9 in Appleton, and there are a number of issues that I have some opinion on, and if I know if I get the seat, that I am probably sitting in a position that's antithetical to most of the aldermen that are moving forward with the momentum on some of these larger development projects. So the question that I'm having is, like, if you're faced with an issue that comes across your desk and maybe you're not up to speed, and suddenly you look at it and say, wow, this is something I can't support, but there's already a huge amount of momentum, it's got tons of support. You know, what do you do in that situation to like maybe slow it down, or how do you find support to like, okay, we've got to readdress this? If you find yourself in a situation that feels untenable, to kind of slow.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what I felt like I was dealing with last year with that tort reform bill. You know, I represent accident victims. I know how bad these accidents are in folks. I know how it impacts their lives for their entire life. And, you know, when we're trying to nickel and dime on every chance we get, you know, that's kind of a concern for me. So that was a situation where the easy thing for me to do was totally just keep my head down and just let it happen. And for me, the way that I address the issue is talk to the particular groups that were the most interested in it, you know, let them use my name as much as they wanted to, and my reputation. And I think that that's one of the things you really have to start with is, you know, when you are new, you have to build credibility. You have to build, you know, basically a reputation where folks know, you know, they don't ever know they can trust you, but they think they can trust you, they want to trust you, you know, and I think that's kind of, you know, where rapport and being honest, all that kind of stuff. But I think credibility starts, and then letting the public know in some way, shape, or form that you are against this issue, whether it's a press release, whether it's, you know, advocating for it on the news, if that's the kind of issue, or just kind of getting out there and giving your perspective and making sure that you're doing your very best. You don't control the media, but you do your very best to try to get your perspective out there. And generally, if it causes controversy and it's adversarial, it's a little bit easier to get that information out there. So,
How hard do you push to speak with the other side of the aisle in a situation like that, where you know their minds are made up?
yeah. Is your situation a friendly fire type of situation, or is it more converse to the other side?
It'll be both.
It'll be both, okay. Well, the friendly fire is usually what hurts the most, because, you know, those are the relationships that you just invested more time and effort into. You feel like they're part of your team, so they should be helping you. But, you know, you can do so much in just an individual conversation with somebody and say, look, you know, this is my personal experience. This is why I know this is a bad idea. You know, my situation was, it was an ability to destroy evidence. So a certain person could get hurt. And I was very much against the idea of an industry being able to destroy the evidence before a subpoena happened to stop them from doing that, because I know it was going to get destroyed before that subpoena made it there, and would be promoting, you know, lack of evidence instead of increasing evidence. And I knew that was wrong. And the best thing I could do is lend my name to it and, you know, go to the individuals on an individual basis and say, look, I know this is wrong. This isn't a maybe. There's a lot of maybes, and there's a lot of things that are outside your wheelhouse that you think, but you're not real sure about. The things that you know, it's best to just say, I know this one. You gotta, you know, give me your trust, and, you know, you get as much as you get if you put yourself out there. And you do, you know, you kind of have to have that, you know, a little bit of that spirit mentality I was telling you at one point. And that sometimes you have to say that this issue is bigger than I am, and, you know, if I really care about what I'm doing, you know, I'm gonna stick my neck out there, and if I lose my job, then so be it. You know, I'll be able to be, you know, I'll be able to leave knowing that I did the right thing. And to me, I think that's a big part of why a person runs for office, if they have the right intentions, is because, not, you know, not a selfish thing, but, you know, because they want to do what's best or what they believe is best.
We're going to, got one more question here. While I'm asking that, Brian has cards, and I'm going to be asking a question from all of you, and you'll respond. But I want you to write your response on, and I'll ask that question as soon as you get a card, and I finish asking this question. So go ahead, Brian, pass out the cards. So this is kind of a general question, and it's kind of turned back onto the league, and so I thought it would be a good discussion point is, meeting and accepting our neighbors takes initiative. How can the league nurture this process? Block party, neighborhood? You know, from your perspective, how can the league help?
I would say things like this, just opportunities to bring parties together and to provide a space where you have a chance to truly have a discussion like this that's open and really invite people from different stakeholders and groups to be together.
More. What do you think, Ann?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is a very warm, very receptive, very accepting, situation that we're in right now. I really appreciate everybody, taking the time to listen to, a different perspective. And, I think that's a great way to start, is to kind of open things up and, try to advocate for something like bipartisanship, something we can all agree on, and not, on any particular ideology that is divisive. So.
Okay, everyone has a card, and I'll ask you this question as well. So there's a couple different ways you can go on this, but in one sentence, I want you to share what was the most meaningful or valuable to you about this experience of this conversation. What did you pick up? What did you learn? Well, be reflective and think about, what was the most important thing that was accomplished here? What new understandings did you get from listening to them share their insights and their selves? We'll give them a moment to think, and then we'll just do a little processing on that. And bring some closure and some summary of what's the... I know, it's hard to teach.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. They do.
I'm sorry.
You can hand them in, yeah, we'll collect, we don't need to collect them right off the bat. Mona might want to add something. So, share what's most meaningful or valuable to you with this experience, with this conversation? What was the ahas or the new understandings, common ground, any of those directions?
For me, it was interesting getting to hear some of Ron's answers, I think, to realize that his experience, I think, with his caucus is sometimes similar to how I feel, even though we're on different sides of the party, that, just know you can have the same feelings and same experiences, even though you're not necessarily in the same party.
Well, and, we talked about trust, and, I'm not sure, I suspect Amanda agrees that, I feel certainly more trusting toward her after we spent some time together. And certainly more trusting to the League of Women Voters as well, after having this conversation and feeling like you were, receptive to, my perspective, and at least understood, and I think that kind of building of trust is certainly something that I got from this experience, and definitely now, we're already thinking of what's the next bill I can do with Amanda, so.
Is there anyone willing to share some of the comments that you made about?
Well, I've discovered that there's not enough sociability going on between the parties, and I would love to see more social events, even like this one or larger, and including more people from both sides of the aisle being here and discussing and having a conversation like this. And I think it would cause more bipartisanship in Madison, where you'll actually be able to work on issues that affect myself and others in Wisconsin, rather than just getting reelected in the next term. And if everybody went to Madison or any political office thinking, I'm only here for this term, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to do the best I can for my people in the state and government, and whatever it turns out at the end, that's what it is. If I don't get reelected, I don't. If I do good, and I think I will, and I do follow my conscience and do the best I can, I will get reelected, because I'll be able to show people, this is what I've done for you, electing on my merits.
If Rhonda, then
Okay.
we'll.
I want to kind of expand what's been going on here, and I don't think the question was asked, but it takes a certain amount of guts when somebody from your own party or of the opposition is being rude. And what would you be willing to do to call them out to say, whoa, I'm uncomfortable with what's going on here. Can we calm down, please? Can we take a break? Can we get more civil? What
Crosses the line.
are you willing to risk?
Well, you know, the trick is that I see a lot of that. You know, in the assembly, I see a lot of folks that try to hit the brakes and kind of say, hey, I don't think this is the values we should be keeping. And it just doesn't seem like they have a voice. It just seems like they say it, and everybody's like, yeah, that guy would get done saying, so I can say my thing. You know, and that's the problem. You know, I think that's part of the problem is that, you know, when somebody steps up and says, you know, hey, you know, we don't have to attack each other personally, or we don't have to do this or that. You know, my experience is that the next person is doing it again, and we didn't even hear that person. So it is. It's frustrating because I think we all agree that we should be civil, but then we get all passionate about an issue, or like Amanda was saying, one person just doesn't like another person and sees this as an opportunity to, get them back or whatever, and tempers flare pretty fast. But I've been thankful that I haven't been involved in anything like that, but it's pretty common.
Well, I know that, but I'm asking, what are you willing to do to try to promote more civil discourse?
Well, I'll give an example of the bill that I talked about that I disagreed with the Democrats on. Quite frankly, I felt like they were game playing. It was just about getting the other side. It wasn't about the policy. And that's why I felt so strongly that I will not participate in this. I'm not going to play games. I'm not going to operate like that.
And you did it in a civil manner.
Yeah, I said no. I didn't yell at anybody. I wasn't being rude, but I just stood up and said no. I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to do it. And it meant that I got threats from my own party, that I was the black sheep of my own party for that. And it wasn't comfortable, but I felt so strongly. I'll give another example. My first session, I tried to start a paper caucus, a bipartisan paper caucus. I spent an entire day calling 35 Republicans and Democrats who had paper companies in their district. And they all said yes, they would be interested in doing this with me. A few hours later, 2 of the Republicans put out an email saying they were starting a bipartisan paper caucus. So when I called them to ask them why they did that, they said, well, leadership heard you were making calls and didn't want you to get credit. So I said, okay, well, can I just be part of your paper caucus? And can I be co-chair, co-vice chair, something, because I have some ideas to bring to the table. And the answer was, I have to ask leadership. So I went back a few days later and said, well, what did your leadership say? Can I be part of your paper caucus? And they said, no, they're not sure you're a friend of the paper industry. So I said, okay, well, what ideas will you guys be working on? Because I do have some ideas. What are your ideas? And I said, well, we don't have any. And then the paper caucus never met the rest of the session. Now, the response from my caucus, my leadership right, was, remember what they did to you, so you can do that back to them when we have power. And my response was, no. I'm not in high school, I'm not keeping a score sheet somewhere, who did what to me so I can remember to get back at them. I won't operate like that. And so it's really, I've been willing to stand up and say no, and when I felt like it was important. But it's awfully hard to do because you do get that pushback.
Right?
So we're asking for, what's the big takeaway for tonight?
What's the
right?
big
For me
takeaway?
personally, one that really comes in, it's really important to me. Some people who know that I've got opposite family and friends, and I've been trying to create this dialogue in this space. And I think the big takeaway for me is it's the face-to-face open dialogue, right? So I really appreciate you guys coming here and demonstrating that for me. I really appreciate that. And I think that's the power, because I've tried it on Facebook, and it goes sideways almost every time. And no matter how I phrase it, how many times I say that's not what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to be respectful, no matter what, it goes sideways. disastrously so in a couple of cases. So, but I think the big takeaways for me, the big learning is this, is how important the face-to-face dialogue is. So whatever we can do to encourage that in Madison, because we both share a lot of examples where that is almost institutionalized help. And we're not going anywhere unless we bring it institutionalized back in.
Does anyone else want to share a big takeaway? Becky?
I just, my impression is the civility and good discussion among two who represent different parties was impressive and helpful.
There's a camaraderie that's taking place up there that I'm real pleased about.
Yeah, we're on the same side of, this problem, and we both really agree on practically everything regarding it. And maybe that's just as important as our parts.
And I guess I would just add, if you're in for the right reason, if you're strong with what you're doing, because no matter what side you're on, you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and you might get fired from both sides.
Jean?
My takeaway as president of the League of Women Voters is that we need to be voting for people who are willing to be bipartisan, because the power is in us. And if we don't vote, we don't use our power. That's my takeaway.
And I think the Fox Valley does a good job in that we don't have a ton of real ideologues in our area. But some of the areas that are more extreme, the Waukesha, Madison areas, they do kind of produce some of that as well, because, it's just an 80-20 district sometimes.
Anybody else want to share their takeaway? Then I believe there are some evaluation forms from the museum, and I know that there were some questions of issue nature that you can talk with them after we're finished, if you wish. And I just have to say, I really appreciate how genuine and upfront and sharing. I know it's a risk to have this kind of a conversation, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.